The night the snow fell red over Crescent Hollow, Maine. The townspeople gathered beneath the black pines, their faces hidden behind wool scarves and trembling candlelight. The wind cut sharp off the Atlantic, carrying the brine of the frozen coast and the scent of burning cedar from the pyres they'd built near the clearing. At the center stood Rowan Pierce, barely 18, her wrists bound with a rope that smelled of salt and iron. Her white dress clung to her legs, damp from the sleet, her breath turning to mist in the bitter cold. Around her, voices murmured. Prayers, ancient words meant to keep the beasts beyond the forest from crossing into the village. But Rowan wasn't afraid of the forest. She was afraid of the men who were sending her into it. Her father wouldn't look at her. He stood at the front of the crowd, his shoulders heavy with shame, his eyes fixed on the ground. The town priest muttered over a leather-bound book, his voice trembling as he spoke the words that sealed her fate. For the blood of the cursed, he said, must answer for the sins of her birth. The rope around her wrists was cut, and the crowd stepped back. Go, her father whispered, his voice hollow. Before they take the others. Rowan turned toward the tree line. The snow there was untouched, glimmering pale under the light of the full moon. The forest had always seemed alive, breathing, waiting. Tonight it felt like it was watching. She didn't cry. She just stepped forward, barefoot into the drifts, her heart steady, her body numb. The silence swallowed her as she crossed into the trees. Behind her, the chanting faded until there was only the crunch of snow beneath her feet and the sound of her own ragged breath. The curse. That was what they called it, the mark she'd carried since birth, a faint crescent scar that glowed faintly under moonlight, the same shape as the bite that had killed her mother before she was born. She didn't believe in the stories. Not until that night. Hours passed. The forest grew darker, the wind colder. Somewhere in the distance, something howled, not like a wolf, not like anything she'd heard before. It was deeper, older, layered with something that felt almost human. She stumbled, her knees hitting the frozen ground. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. She pressed her palm against her chest, feeling the tremor of her heart. Then, through the fog of snow, a shape appeared, tall, moving with the quiet grace of something that didn't belong to this world. Who's there? Rowan called, her voice breaking. The figure didn't answer. He stepped closer, and the moonlight caught him. A man, his coat heavy and dark, his hair damp with snow, his eyes reflecting gold like molten metal. He wasn't from the village. He couldn't be. You shouldn't be here, he said, his voice low, the sound of it carrying through the trees like thunder rolling far away. Rowan's breath hitched. They sent me. As an offering, he stilled, his jaw tightened. To what? She hesitated. To the beasts that haunt these woods. They say it's the only way to keep them away from the town. His eyes darkened, the gold flaring like fire. And they chose you? I was born cursed, she whispered. Something in his expression changed, a flicker of pain or recognition. He took a slow step toward her, his breath visible in the cold air. What's your name? Rowan Pierce. He closed his eyes briefly, as if the name itself carried weight. Go back, Rowan. I can't, she said. They'll kill me if I return. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the hiss of snow falling through the branches. Then, suddenly the wind shifted, carrying a sound that froze her blood. More howls, closer, coming fast. The man turned sharply, his nostrils flaring, his body tensing. They've scented you. Rowan stumbled backward. What are they? He didn't answer. He reached for her instead, his hand rough and warm as he caught her wrist. Run! She barely had time to breathe before he pulled her through the snow, faster than she thought possible, his stride long and sure. Behind them, the howls multiplied, echoing through the forest. They burst into a clearing, the remains of an ancient stone circle, half buried under moss and frost. The man pushed her behind him, his body coiled, his eyes burning. Stay down, he said, his voice low and trembling with something not quite human. The first creature lunged out of the dark, a blur of fur and teeth and shadow. Rowan screamed. The man met it midair, and the sound that tore from his throat wasn't human. Bones cracked. Flesh rippled. His coat split down the back as his Shoulders expanded, his hands twisting into claws, his teeth lengthening into fangs that caught the moonlight. Rowan fell to the ground, frozen in horror and awe. He wasn't a man. He was the alpha dot, the creature that the town had feared for generations. The beast they offered sacrifices to every full moon, but he wasn't devouring her. He was protecting her. When the last of the pack fled into the woods, the clearing fell silent again. The snow glowed pink where the blood had melted it. The alpha, the man, was on his knees, chest heaving, his claws retracting as his body shuddered and reshaped itself. He looked up at her, his eyes still gold. "You shouldn't have been sent here," he rasped. "You're one of us." Rowan's breath caught. "What?" He reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her face, his touch gentle despite the blood still on his hands. "The mark you carry, it isn't a curse, it's a bond." Her pulse stuttered. "A bond to what?" "To me," he said softly. "You were never meant to be sacrificed, Rowan Pierce. You were born to be claimed." She couldn't speak. Couldn't move. The words hung between them, electric, impossible dot. Then he leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. "And whether you accept it or not, the moon has already chosen." The air grew still dot, and under the light of that blood red. Moon. Moon. Rowan realized that the monsters her people feared were not the ones waiting in the woods, but the ones who had sent her there. The alpha rose to his full height, his gaze fierce and unyielding. "They'll come for you again," he said. "But next time, they'll find that the offering belongs to me." Dawn came slow and silver over Crescent Hollow, spilling pale light across the pines and frozen riverbanks. The forest, blanketed in frost, looked deceptively calm. No trace of blood, no footprints except for Rowan's, half filled with snow. She followed the stranger, no, the alpha, through the woods in silence. The air around him felt alive, humming with something she couldn't name. Every step he took seemed to bend the forest slightly toward him, the branches shifting as though recognizing their master. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice raw from the cold. He didn't turn, somewhere safe. "The others won't follow once the sun rises." Rowan hesitated, pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders. "Others like you?" He stopped then, glancing over his shoulder. His eyes weren't gold anymore. They'd cooled to a deep amber, almost human. "There are none like me," he said. "Not anymore." They broke through the trees into a clearing where an old cabin stood near the edge of a frozen stream. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney, curling against the pale sky. The scent of pine, earth, and something wild clung to the air. He pushed the door open and gestured for her to enter. Inside, the cabin was rough but warm. A fire burned in the stone hearth, casting light over animal pelts and shelves stacked with glass jars and dried herbs. There was a stillness to the space, a solitude that felt both safe and unbearably lonely. He hung his coat on a nail by the door. "You can rest here." "No one will find you." Rowan stood by the fire, watching him. "Who are you?" He hesitated before answering. "Silas Vale." The name rolled through the air like something heavy. "You're the alpha," she said. "I was," he corrected quietly. "Before I left the pack." She frowned. "Why did you leave?" He looked into the fire, his expression shadowed. "Because I wouldn't do what they wanted. Because I wouldn't keep the curse alive." Rowan stepped closer. "The curse that my village believes in?" He met her gaze then, and the look in his eyes made her heart stumble. "The one your bloodline carries." She felt the air shift. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and took her wrist, turning her palm upward. The faint crescent-shaped mark on her skin glowed faintly under the light. "This isn't just a symbol," he said. "It's an inheritance. You carry the blood of the first. Alpha's daughter, the one the pack betrayed and sacrificed to seal their power. The same night your mother died." Rowan pulled her hand back. "You're lying." "I wish I were," Silas said softly. "The pack has been looking for you since the night you were born. To them, you're not a curse, you're a key. Your blood could awaken the moon bond again." "The moon bond?" "It binds an alpha to the one chosen by the moon. Their power becomes shared, stronger, eternal. But there's a price. When the bond seals, their lives become one. If one dies..." He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "So does the other." Rowan stared at him, her heart pounding. And you think I'm meant to be bound to you? I don't think, he said, stepping closer. I know. The air between them thickened, warm despite the cold. She could feel the heat coming off him, not just from his body, but from something deeper, something alive. You saved me, she said, her voice trembling. Why? If I'm part of this curse, if my blood is dangerous, why not let me die? Silas's gaze softened, the edge in him flickering to something else, something almost tender. Because when I saw you, I felt it. Felt what? He exhaled slowly, as though confessing hurt him. The bond. Rowan stepped back, her pulse quickening. That's not possible. It shouldn't be, he said. Not after all these years. But when the moon touched your skin, I heard it. Your heartbeat, it called to mine. She shook her head. No, I don't want this. I never asked for any of it. I know, he said quietly. But the moon doesn't care what we want. She turned toward the fire, her body trembling, from fear, from confusion, from something else she couldn't admit. If I stay here, they'll come for me. The pack, the village. Maybe both. Silas nodded. Then let them come. Rowan looked up at him. You can't fight them alone. His lips curved slightly. You don't know what I've survived. But she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he carried his strength like a burden. He wasn't invincible. He was wounded, inside and out. Outside, the wind shifted. The scent of snow carried something else with it. Iron, earth, danger. Silas's head snapped toward the window. They've crossed the river. The pack? He didn't answer. He moved to the door, his movements suddenly sharp, feral. They're coming for you. They'll try to take you before the next full moon. Rowan's chest tightened. Why then? Because that's when the bond completes itself, he said. If they kill you before that, the curse dies with you. But if they take you to their alpha and force the bond, they'll have control of every wolf between here and the sea. She took a step forward, fear and fire warring inside her. Then what do we do? Silas looked back at her, and for a moment, the world seemed to still around them. We run, he said, until I can find a way to break the bond. But if it's real, she whispered, you'll die if I die. And I'll die if you do. His voice softened. Then we protect each other. The sound of howling split the air, closer this time, echoing through the trees like a warning. Silas grabbed a worn leather satchel from the table, slung it over his shoulder and opened the door. The cold rushed in, sharp, merciless. He glanced back at her. Stay close. Don't stop for anything. Rowan hesitated, her hand clutching the silver pendant she wore under her dress, the only thing she had left of her mother. Then she followed him out into the snowdot as they ran through the woods. The moon slipped behind a veil of clouds, and for a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere behind them, the pack howled again, but this time, the sound wasn't of hunger, though it was rage. And above it, carried by the wind, came a single voice, low, cruel, and eerily human. Bring me the girl. The cursed daughter belongs to me. Rowan froze, the words chilling her to her core. Silas turned sharply, his eyes gold again, the alpha rising in him like fire. Run, Rowan, that's not just any wolf. Her voice broke. Who is it? He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes told her everything. It's the one who took everything from me, he said. The true alpha of the north. The night around them roared to life, the forest no longer silent, but alive with pursuit, and as they vanished into the snow, Rowan felt something shift deep inside her, the mark on her wrist pulsing in rhythm with Silas's heartbeat. As though the moon itself was stitching their fates tighter with every step, the forest stretched endlessly before them, dark and heavy beneath the weight of the storm. Snow fell in thick curtains, erasing their tracks almost as quickly as they were made. Rowan's lungs burned with cold, her breath visible in short, desperate bursts. Silas moved ahead of her with inhuman grace, his coat whipping behind him, his shoulders broad and tense beneath the rising wind. They had been running for hours, guided only by the faint light of dawn bleeding through the trees. When Silas finally stopped, they were deep within the mountains, too far for the villagers, yet not far enough from the pack. He led her into a cave carved into the rock, hidden by a curtain of frozen ivy. Inside it was warmer than she expected. The scent of earth and pine filled the air, and the faint glow of a torch flickered against the stone walls. Silas dropped the satchel to the ground. We'll rest here. Just for a while. Rowan collapsed against the wall, shivering. They're still following us, aren't they? He nodded. They won't stop. Not while the bond remains incomplete. She stared at the flame dancing between them. You said the full moon would seal it. Yes. His voice was quiet, distant. In 3 nights. She hesitated, then whispered, What happens when it's complete? Silas looked up. The gold in his eyes dimmed to a dark amber. When the bond seals, your heartbeat and mine will merge. Our strength will be shared. Our lives tied. And if we break it before then? He hesitated. One of us dies. The words fell like ice between them. Rowan's throat tightened. So we're running toward something we can't escape. He didn't answer, but the silence said everything. After a moment, she said softly, You knew this would happen. From the moment you saw me. He looked at her sharply. I didn't choose this, Rowan. But you felt it, she said. You knew the bond had begun. Silas's jaw tightened. And you think I wanted it? That I wanted to be tied to someone who's hunted by both my kind and yours? Her voice wavered. You could have let me die that night. He turned away, muscles tensing. I couldn't. The cave fell silent, except for the distant sound of the storm outside. Rowan watched the torchlight flicker over his face, the scars that traced his jaw, the exhaustion buried in his eyes. There was a loneliness in him that felt endless, a wound that no fire could heal. Silas, she said quietly, who is the Alpha of the North? For a long moment he didn't move. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. My brother. Her breath caught. Your brother? He nodded slowly. His name is Cade. He took the pack from me years ago, after I refused to continue the sacrifices. Rowan's eyes widened. The offerings. The ones from the village. Yes, his gaze darkened. Cade made a deal with your people generations ago. In exchange for blood, he would protect the valley. But the bond between our kind and theirs was never meant to be one of worship. It was supposed to be balance. When I took the Alpha's place, I tried to end it. He called me weak. He called me traitor. And when I stood against him, his voice faltered. He burned the pack hall. He killed everyone who stood with me. Rowan stared at him, her heart heavy. Including her? He froze, eyes snapping up to meet hers. The woman you once loved, she said softly. The one the curse took. For a long time he said nothing. Then with a quiet exhale, her name was Lyra. She was like you, human, brave, too brave. Too brave. Too brave. A human. Brave. The pack found out about her, and Cade he stopped. His eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, wet with something that wasn't just rage. I buried her beneath the full moon, the same way they buried your mother. Rowan felt her chest tighten. So you saved me because of her? He shook his head slowly. No, I saved you because when I found you, I felt her heartbeat inside yours. She stared at him, unable to breathe. Then, softly, she said, Maybe it wasn't her heartbeat you felt. Maybe it was mine. For a fleeting moment, something warm flickered in his expression. Fragile, dangerous. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. The storm had deepened into a blizzard, the kind that silenced everything but the wind. Silas stood, restless, pacing near the cave's mouth. We'll move again at dusk. They'll track us through scent once the snow stops. Rowan hesitated. Silas, if Cade finds us, what will he do? He'll kill me. His tone was matter-of-fact, cold. And he'll use you to rebuild what was lost. Her hands trembled. There has to be another way. There isn't, he said. But something in his eyes betrayed him. A shadow of fear. Not for himself, for her. Hours passed. Rowan drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, haunted by dreams of fire and howling voices. When she woke, the storm had calmed, the torchlight dim. Silas sat near the entrance silent, his gaze fixed on the forest beyond. Can't sleep. She whispered. He turned, his expression unreadable. When you've lived as long as I have, sleep is the closest thing to death. She moved closer to him, drawn by something she didn't understand. Then maybe you should rest. He gave a quiet, humorless smile. If I close my eyes, I'll see her face again. Lyra? He nodded once. Do you think she'd want you to keep carrying this? He looked at her, startled. What? The guilt, Rowan said softly. The loneliness. You've turned it into your penance. He studied her for a long moment, the air between them tightening. You speak like you've known loss. I have, she said. I just never had anyone to share it with. The silence that followed was thick, fragile. The firelight played over her face, over the faint crescent mark on her wrist that pulsed faintly in rhythm with the rise and fall of his chest. Then Silas reached out, slowly, like he was fighting himself, and brushed his fingers across her mark. The touch sent a shiver down her spine. Your pulse, he murmured. It's syncing with mine. What does that mean? He met her gaze, his voice barely a whisper. It means the bond has already begun. Rowan's heart slammed against her ribs. She tried to pull her hand back, but his grip tightened. Not to restrain, but to plead. You don't understand, he said. If I feel this now, Cade will too. He'll sense the connection. He'll come faster. Then teach me to fight, she said, trembling. If this curse ties us together, I want to be more than something to protect. His eyes burned brighter at that. Like the ember of something long dead had sparked again. You don't know what you're asking. I know enough, she whispered. If I die, you die too. So let me help you survive. He stared at her, this fragile, defiant girl who had once been left to die in the snow, and something inside him broke. Without another word, he nodded. At dawn. But as the first pale light touched the horizon, a howl shattered the air, not distant. Not far, right outside the cave, Silas's body went rigid. He turned to Rowan, his voice low and rough. Stay behind me. Then the shadow of a man appeared at the mouth of the cave, tall, dark, his eyes the color of burning coals. Brother, the man said, his voice deep, smooth, and full of venom. You found her for me. Silas's breath hitched, his body trembling with barely contained fury. Cade. The new alpha smiled, a cold, cruel twist of his lips. You always did have a soft spot for doomed girls. The cave filled with the sound of breathing, slow, deep animal. The storm outside had quieted, but the air was thick with something heavier than cold. Cade Vale, the alpha of the north, stood framed in the pale mouth of the cave, snow drifting around him like ashes. His eyes glowed red gold in the half-light, and when he smiled, Rowan felt the air leave her lungs. After all these years, brother, Cade said softly, his voice low and smooth as dark wine. You finally bring her to me yourself. Silas stepped between them, every muscle taut. His body blocked the light, his shadow cast over Rowan like a shield. You're not taking her. Cade's smirk widened. You can't keep her. The bond's already begun. I can smell it on her. The moon marked her for the alpha, not for an exile. Rowan's heart pounded. Why do you want me? She demanded, her voice trembling. Cade's gaze slid to her, sharp and hungry. Because your blood carries what our kind lost long ago. You're the last descendant of the moon-born line, the bridge between Wolf and human, born of both. If you complete the bond under my hand, I'll be invincible. He took a slow step forward, and the firelight rippled across his face. But if he fights it, the bond will still seal, painfully, fatally. Silas's claws began to show through his skin, his voice a growl. You're not touching her. Cade tilted his head. Still pretending you're her savior? You think she doesn't see it? The bond's already inside her, Silas. Every time your hearts beat together, every time you breathe the same air, she becomes less human. Soon she craved the hunt, the blood, the moon, just like the rest of us. Rowan's chest tightened. That's not true. But the mark on her wrist pulsed, faintly glowing through the fabric of her sleeve. The same warmth she'd felt that first night, the same pull toward Silas, now burned deep in her veins. Cade noticed. Ah, he murmured. There it is. In one blurred motion, Silas lunged. The two collided with a sound like thunder. The walls of the cave shook, snow and ice raining from the ceiling as claws met claws, teeth met blood. Rowan screamed, stumbling backward as the brothers fought, two shadows caught between human and beast. "Stop!" she cried. But her voice was lost under the roar of growls and shattering stone. Cade slammed Silas against the wall, pinning him with his forearm. "You were never strong enough to lead," he hissed. "Too much heart. Too much weakness." Silas shoved back, his fangs bared. "Strength isn't killing what you love. Then what is it?" Cade's hand shot out, gripping Silas by the throat. "Dying for her?" He threw his brother across the cave. Silas hit the ground hard, coughing blood. Rowan ran to him, kneeling beside him, her hands trembling. "Silas, please." But his eyes had changed again, glowing bright gold, his voice rough and barely human. "Run!" Cade turned toward her, his face splattered with blood, but still perfectly composed. "You can't run from destiny, girl." Rowan rose slowly, meeting his gaze. "I'm not running." Her mark flared brighter now, a white light spilling through her skin, flooding the cave with cold, moonlit fire. Cade froze. "What are you doing?" he hissed. Rowan's voice shook, but it was steady enough. "If this bond belongs to the moon, then it's mine to command." Silas stared up at her, pain twisting through his features. "No, Rowan, you don't know what that will cost." Cade laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "You think you can wield it? You're mortal." Rowan stepped forward, the light growing until her hair shimmered like silver. "Not anymore." The glow rippled out from her, shaking the ground. The symbols carved into the cave walls began to burn faintly, like old runes awakening after centuries of silence. Cade roared, his body shifting, half man, half beast, as he lunged. But this time, Rowan didn't flinch. She lifted her hand, and the mark blazed. The bond between her and Silas flared like lightning. The light struck Cade midder, hurling him backward. He hit the rock wall with a snarl, the impact echoing through the cave. For a moment, everything went still except the sound of the storm outside. Then, slowly, Cade began to laugh. "Foolish girl," he rasped, his voice echoing. "You've awakened it completely. Now the bond is irreversible." Rowan staggered, clutching her wrist. The light dimmed, but the burn beneath her skin remained. She could feel it, Silas's heartbeat pounding through hers. Their breaths tangled, their fates fused. Silas forced himself to his feet, his voice low and shaking. "Get out!" Cade smirked. "You think you can banish me, brother? I don't need to." Silas stepped forward, golden light rippling under his skin. "Because she's not yours to claim. She's mine." Cade's smile faded. "Then she'd die with you." The two brothers clashed again, and this time, the cave couldn't contain it. The walls split, rock cracking, the fire scattering into sparks. Rowan stumbled toward the exit, light and shadow chasing across her face as the storm outside howled back to life. Silas's roar filled the air. Not anger this time, but something deeper, desperate. "Go, Rowan!" But she couldn't leave. Not now. Not when the bond had tied them together, not when she felt his pain as her own. She turned back, tears streaking her face. "I won't leave you." Cade struck Silas hard across the chest, claws sinking deep. Silas fell to his knees. Blood spilled across the snow that had begun to drift into the cave. "Silas!" Rowan screamed, running to him. He caught her wrist before she could touch him, his breathing ragged. "If I die here, you die too," he gasped. "You have to break the bond." "I can't." "Yes, you can." His eyes softened, even through the pain. "You're stronger than you know." Behind them, Cade rose again, his body shaking, his voice no longer human. "Neither of you leaves alive." Silas stood, using the last of his strength to push Rowan behind him. "Then we fall together." And with a final, guttural growl he lunged, not to attack, but to pull Cade into the heart of the fire that still burned from Rowan's light. The brothers collided, their bodies blurring into shadow and flame, their howls echoing as the mountain shook. "Silas!" Rowan cried, her voice lost in the roar. The fire swallowed them both. The world went white. When Rowan opened her eyes, she was lying outside the cave. Snow was falling again, soft, gentle, quiet. The mountain was still. There was no sign of Cade, no trace of Silas, only the faint glow of her mark, pulsing once, twice, before fading completely. And with it, the last echo of his heartbeat inside her. She buried her face in her hands, the tears hot against the winter air. The storm had ended, but her world had gone silent. Somewhere deep in the forest, a lone wolf howled. Rowan lifted her head. Breath trembling. It was his voice. The winter in Crescent Hollow broke late that year. Snow still clung to the trees like memory, the river frozen in long, glassy veins. But something in the air had changed. Lighter, freer. The villagers said it was because the curse had lifted. The wolves no longer howled at night. The forest no longer watched from the shadows. Only Rowan Pierce knew the truth. She had been found 2 days after the storm by a group of hunters searching for lost livestock. They carried her back to the village half conscious, her body half frozen, her pulse faint but steady. When she finally woke, the world was quiet, and the mark on her wrist was gone. The people called it a miracle. She didn't correct them. Every night since, Rowan walked to the edge of the woods, where the trees grew close and the snow melted first. The forest wasn't frightening anymore. It hummed softly, alive but not dangerous. The moon shone silver through the branches, and when the wind passed, it felt like breath against her skin. She could almost hear him there. Silas. The name was a wound that refused to scar. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she could still feel his warmth, the heartbeat that once pulsed inside hers. The weight of his voice saying her name like it was something sacred. They had told her he was gone. That whatever had happened in the mountains had taken both wolves with it. But deep down, Rowan wasn't sure. Not when the forest still whispered his name. Not when the wolves still avoided her, bowing their heads as they passed. One evening, as the last light faded, she walked farther than she ever had since that night. The snow had begun to thaw, revealing moss and soil beneath. Her boots sank into the soft earth, and the scent of pine filled the air. The forest was beautiful in its silence. Then she saw it, the cave, half collapsed, the stones blackened, the mouth sealed by roots and ice. But something shimmered faintly at its entrance, a thread of gold, pulsing softly, like light trapped in frost. Her breath caught. "Silas," she whispered. The air stirred. A wind rose through the trees, curling around her like a sigh. It wasn't cold. It was warm, the same warmth she'd felt the night he carried her through the snow. She knelt, pressing her palm against the frozen earth. "If you're still here, show me." For a moment there was nothing. Just the crackle of branches and the distant cry of an owl. Then the ground beneath her hand vibrated. Faintly at first, then stronger. A steady, rhythmic thrum, a heartbeat. Rowan gasped, her tears spilling freely. "You're alive." The sound grew softer, like a whisper under her skin. She could hear his voice then. Low, familiar, impossibly close. "You freed me." "Rowan, the fire didn't take me. It changed me." She pressed her hand harder against the ground, her breath trembling. "Where are you?" "Everywhere the forest breathes. The curse bound us to the moon. Your heart unbound it. I'm part of the wild now. The alpha without chains." She closed her eyes, tears streaking her cheeks. "Then why can't I see you?" The wind shifted again, brushing her hair back from her face. Gentle, tender. "Because if you did, you wouldn't let me go." Rowan's throat ached. "I don't want to let you go." "You already have," his voice said softly. "And because of that, I can stay." She looked up through the trees. The moon had risen, full, bright, silver. The same moon that had marked her, that had stolen him, that now hung calm and silent over a peaceful world. For a long moment, she sat there in the cold, her hand pressed to the ground, her tears turning to frost. Then she whispered, "I'll never forget you." The forest answered, not in words but in sound. The rustle of leaves, the shift of snow, the faint, distant call of a wolf far up the mountain. It was sorrow and promise all at once. When she finally stood, the heartbeat beneath her faded, not gone, just quieter. Deeper. Rowan turned back toward the village. The path lit by moonlight. The villagers watched her differently now. They no longer crossed themselves when she passed. Children whispered stories about the girl who survived the curse. Some said she was touched by the moon. Others said she was blessed by the wolves. She let them believe whatever they wanted. At night, she returned to the forest's edge, where she'd built a small cabin of her own. She grew herbs, kept candles by the window, and wrote in a journal she never showed anyone. Letters to a man who might still be listening. Weeks passed. The air softened. The snow turned to rain. One night, as spring broke over Crescent Hollow, Rowan stood outside beneath the blooming birches. The moon hung low and golden, and the woods shimmered with new life. A low sound rose from deep within the forest, a single, haunting howl. Not a warning. Not a cry of rage. It was a call. Her heart stilled. She stepped forward slowly, barefoot in the dew, her eyes fixed on the tree line. The wind carried the scent of pine and smoke and something familiar. "Silas?" she whispered. The shadows shifted, and there, between the trees, a shape emerged. Tall, human, barefoot. The moonlight clinging to his skin like it belonged there. Rowan's breath caught. He was exactly as she remembered, though his eyes were softer now. Their gold light tempered by peace instead of fury. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, a faint smile on his lips, and in that moment she knew he wasn't fully flesh nor spirit. He was something between the alpha of the wild, bound not to curse, but to her. Her tears blurred the world. "Is it really you?" He took one step forward, the snow untouched beneath his feet. "Always." And before she could move, before she could blink, he was gone, fading into the forest with the rising mist. But where he had stood, the ground glowed faintly, a single crescent of light pulsing in the moss. Rowan knelt, touching it, her heart steady. The mark was back on her wrist, faint, warm, alive. Not a curse. A promise. She smiled through her tears, whispering into the wind, "Until the moon forgets the night." And somewhere, deep among the pines, the alpha answered, a howl low and eternal, carrying through the air like a vow that would never break. The moon hung over Crescent Hollow, pale and unblinking, as if guarding what the world could not understand, that love, once claimed by the wild, never truly dies.